Welcome back, everybody. Hello, everyone. Big news weekend day, whatever. Hey, guys, let me get TikTok going. We're going to talk about Ukraine, about Syria today, because I think it's too important of a topic and such a big deal that I would like to spend some time today talking about it. So let me just look real quick to make sure. Oops, do not put funny effects on my screen. I think we're okay. All right, good. Oh, that was the problem. Okay, I did have a funny filter on. That was bad. Looking better now. Go live. All righty. All right. Woo! And I'm going to try sitting up today. My back is feeling a little better. We'll see. Otherwise, I'm going to slouch if I have to. We shall see. Oh, boy. Crazy. Absolutely crazy day today. And Callum's going to join us. We're going to have Callum as our special guest, since he's British military and has spent time in Syria, actually. Very interesting guy. There's Callum. Hey, TikTokers. How you all doing today? I may slouch. I can feel my back starting to go a little bit like, yeah, I'm going to slouch again today. I don't want to force it. All right. It does feel slightly better, but all right, guys, hold on. I'm slouching again today since my back is bothering me a little bit, but that's better though. It's pretty good. Pretty good. All right. Hey, TikTokers. Woo! TikTok has just started. Yep. So TikTok, we got you rolling. Let me grab Callum here. Callum, baby. There you are. All right. All right, there's Callum. We'll see if he puts on his video or not. Callum, are you not going to put video on? Let's see if he does. I don't think I warned him about that. Thank you, Misha. I'm actually not dressed that well. It's just a sweater, but still. As we said, I do think it's important to make an appearance for it's a video show. Video shows should look good on video. Callum is going to join us today. Hey, guys on TikTok. My friend Callum, who is a longtime good friend, one of our moderators here on TikTok and YouTube, but also former British military for a long time, has spent time in Syria, among other places. We are going to talk about Syria today. I thought it might be interesting to have a Syria day, since it's such a big story, I think, and it affects the region, it affects Ukraine, it affects Russia, that I think it would be interesting. And maybe at the end, we'll even talk about that crazy story here in the States about the guy getting caught who allegedly shot the New York healthcare CEO. Thank you, Diana. My back is improved. It's still feeling a little weird when I'm sitting up straight, so it is still, I think it's 40% better from the shot, which is something. Not enough, but it's something. Thank you, S. Hopefully, I hope to help the people in Syria if we can. Hey, Callum, so are you comfortable doing video? I should have told you, video is way better for this than just audio.
Yeah, I don't mind. Sorry, I think I'm right. But
just because
I don't have enough followers.
Oh, I hate TikTok. Is it not going to let you? Except it's letting you be a guest.
Well, I did.
See if it lets you. See if it lets you. Otherwise,
say yes to video, and it's not opened it up.
Interesting. TikTok. Evil TikTok.
See, give me a second.
I mean, that may just be the way it is, but unless there's a setting for me. Otherwise. Oh, excellent, Paula. Thank you. Paula sending me chocolate from the UK. Woo-woo.
If I can,
let me just see here. Guess.
There is a setting.
Well, let's see. It's showing your picture at least.
It says live access needed to go live as a video guest. Yeah, I don't have enough followers.
Callum doesn't have access to join live. All right. Well, if folks want to follow Callum, how many followers do you have?
I don't know, but I think we need like 1,000 or something.
Well, if folks want to try to follow Callum, maybe we can get him enough followers that we actually can have him on video. My friend Callum is joining us today. YouTubers, as always, you'll have to just kind of listen in. Oh, actually, no, I'm not using my mic today. That's right. So you'll have to just listen in. I will pull my computer closer, so you should be able to hear Callum. Private account. Oh, Callum, your account's private too. Do you know that?
Yes.
Do you want it to be private?
If I can unprivate it.
I would, because then people can follow you, and there's a chance we can actually get you some video and some followers. In the meantime, correct. Congrats to all the people in Syria. Very exciting about that news. We're going to talk about that today.
Right, privacy is off.
All right, privacy is off. Try following Callum now. There we go. Magic was able to follow you. All righty. So yeah, if enough of you follow Callum, we may be able to have him as a video guest. We are at least going to have him as an, oh, thank you for the, oh, those butterflies are cool. Thank you, Christina, for the butterflies. Thank you guys for all the gifts coming in. So, all right, well, we will have to see Callum at some point. Thank you guys for the gifts. At some point, we'll see if Callum can go live with video. I don't know how many followers you need. You know what? Try it again right now because you were private. Maybe being private, it didn't like it. Same problem?
Live access needs to go live as a video guest. You can go live on audio.
Oh, you need another 600 people. Some people say 300. Well, you know what? So, let's see. Let's see. It shouldn't still come up as private. It should be public now, guys. Anyway, hello, everybody. All right, we'll try to follow Callum. Try to follow Callum. Your followers are doubled at least, but yeah, it might be 1,000. If we're lucky, we can get him enough followers that we can have, you can have Callum's beautiful Scottish face decking us at least maybe for this show or another one. My mic is on, except that I'm not using my good mic because I will not be able to hear Callum on my iPad if I'm using my good mic. So it's saying private still for some people. Not sure why.
Just take a moment to update or something.
Yeah, it's working for others.
I've now just got a bunch of people following me all the time, so
okay,
150 followers.
Good,
so.
Good. We'll keep following, good guys. All right, guys, I'm gonna start here. Keep trying to follow Callum so we can get him enough followers to do video. But we are going to talk today about Syria. It is such a big story. I think it's just important to talk about. Period. It also has great implications for the region, obviously, for Russia, for America, for Israel, for Ukraine even. Ukraine played a role in the liberation of Syria, I would argue, and possibly maybe even directly. Indirectly, they certainly did in terms of bogging the Russians down. But I think it's such a fascinating story. On a personal level, I do not have as much of a tie to the Middle East as I do to European politics. Latin American too, in terms of my background, but I'm meaning my education background. But this is such an important story. It is so. I was thinking of this, and I saw somebody else make the same comment. You know, for those of us of a certain age, this is very much akin to the Berlin Wall coming down in Europe. It's that same kind of feeling. It's really kind of amazing to see. You know, where will this go from here? Will this be a, will Syria truly become free as a result of this, right? Will they go backwards? Will the guys taking over turn into bad guys? Let's talk about all of that. So Callum, maybe let's start. Where do we start with this? All right, let me actually start first. So Syria, run by dictators for the last 54 years or so. It's been run by the Assad family. The first dictator was Hafez Assad. He is the father of the current dictator who just got ran out. Hafez takes over early 1970s. Horrible guy, mass murderer, wiped out. I'm trying to remember the exact scenario, but early 1980s, maybe 1982, wipes out one of his own towns. I mean, just kills everybody, kills all the civilians. He's, again, brutal murderer, brutal dictatorship. His son takes over. Hafez dies. Son takes over, I think maybe 24 years ago, something like that. Was it Hama? I was forgetting the name of the town. Thank you. It was Hama. I was thinking Homs, but I get mixed up which of them blew up which town, because both father and son have been so murderous against their own civilians. So son takes over, and what does son do? Son, very famously, Bashar al-Assad, who's the dictator who just got run out, ends up nerve gassing a couple of his towns back early 2000s. I don't know if it was 2013, something like that. I saw, God, some of the video came out. They were showing the video again yesterday, and I was like, oh my God, really horrible. He used nerve gas on his own citizens, 2012, 2013. And the video coming out showed these fathers carrying their children, some of the children naked because they were trying to just get all the poison off of them. And these kids are lying dead, basically, foam coming out of their mouth. I mean, it's important to tell you because it was so horrific. This dictator gassed his own people, gassed his own civilians knowing what he was doing. So for, I don't know how many years now, 13, 14 years, you've had sort of an insurrection against him, an insurgency, a lot of different groups. They were very successful 10 years ago or so, maybe 8 years ago. The Russians jumped in, bombed the crap out of them with their air force, and helped Assad, the dictator, hold on to power. Without the Russians, he would have lost. Fast forward to today, about 10, 12 days ago, another big push by the insurgents. This time, for God knows what reason, and we're going to ask Callum if he's got an idea, this time it works. In only 10 days or so, this insurgency, these rebels, are able to overthrow the entire government. 10 days. A 54-year-old dictatorship within 10 days. Callum, maybe let's start with that a little bit. Why, do you have a sense of why this time the insurgency was so effective? And I mean, not only why did it work, but it worked in 10 days. That's crazy.
There's kind of various factors playing into that. The first one is they have had some outside help in regards to intelligence, be that from Ukraine or other actors. They've had some more outside help with resources that weren't previously available to them.
Right.
Wouldn't be normally available to a rebel group.
So are you when you say resources not available, so you're saying intelligence, do you mean weapons as well?
Intelligence, weapons, satellite pictures, things that they wouldn't normally have.
Okay.
For a rebel group.
I should say, by the way, Callum, let me jump in. I didn't really introduce you. Callum is an old friend. He's one of our moderators here on TikTok and YouTube. He is also former British military, was there, God, maybe 10 years-ish with the British military, has served in Syria, among other places. So he has a lot of knowledge of these issues, perhaps too much knowledge of these issues. He will tell us if I ask him questions he can't answer. But I wanted him to talk to us because he really does have a very good insider knowledge of the military situation and everything else there. So I'm sorry. So go on, Callum.
Yeah. So the various factors, intelligence that wasn't previously available to them. There is, I had heard some rumors that some weapons were made available to them that weren't previously available to them.
Right.
They've been worn down over so long, like the Syrian, the Assad regime has been worn down over so long. The soldiers were really starting to not feel it anymore, if you like.
What does that mean? What do you mean soldiers were not starting to feel it?
So you can only go on for so long before your morale starts to wear down.
Okay.
When you see the horrible things that are happening and it's not going anywhere, and then the promises that have been made to you haven't been kept.
Okay.
Russia wasn't. The big factor really is that Russia wasn't there to save them this time.
Right.
Russia couldn't afford to save them this time. They didn't have the resources. They didn't have the weapons to save them, really.
Right. Right. Now, Syria, now Iran too. I mean, could Iran have saved them if Iran got involved, or would it really have taken a Russia level of intervention to have saved Assad?
I don't think Iran has the resources to do that presently. After the recent attacks on Israel, they're likely a bit depleted in what they would be able to provide.
Are you? Let me ask you really quick. Are you saying that Iran didn't have enough weapons to help Syria, A, because they already spent the weapons attacking Israel, or B, because Israel destroyed a lot of the weapons fighting back against Iran, or C, they had to save the weapons because they've still got to get ready for a possible war with Israel?
All of the above.
Okay. Okay.
So they've used an exorbitant amount of weapons in the couple barrages that they threw towards Israel. They will need to keep some for when Israel inevitably bombs them again.
Okay.
C, they will just so then, well, you always want to have some to hand for anything, but they've used so much of their weapons as of late to cause problems for Israel that they just don't have it to back up.
Okay.
So they don't have 400 or 500 missiles, 1,000 missiles
Okay.
to support Syria.
Right.
They just don't have it.
And if you could try to speak up a little, you're okay on the iPad on TikTok, but I've got the YouTubers trying to hear you, and you're still a little soft spoken. So if you can project better, try it. Otherwise, it is what it is.
Yeah, I'll move it up.
He's Scottish. He's not allowed. He's not allowed American. So we got to deal with what we got.
Well, I am Scottish, quite loud.
That's what I. Oh, are you? Well, that's well. You guys get loud when you drink, at least. But yeah. So on the Russian side, Russia wasn't able to help. Is it pretty much because of the war in Ukraine that Russia's hands were tied?
Yeah, they don't have the weapons spare. They don't have hundreds of glide bombs or air-launched missiles spare because they're throwing them at Ukraine.
What kind of weapons would they have needed to help to help the Syrians?
They'd have needed armored fighting vehicles and tanks. They would have needed kind of air-launched missiles, glide bombs, things like that.
Everything they're using in Ukraine, basically.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, it's funny in a way because, I mean, in their own way, the Ukrainian, what's funny actually, not only did the Ukrainians help the Syrians by tying down the Russians, but the Americans ended up, and I mean, I'm not going to take credit for America here. This was the Syrian people, but the Americans and Biden, as much as I am critical of Biden on Ukraine, because I think Biden, frankly, should have supported Ukraine even more, by being so supportive of Ukraine, Biden ended up tying the Russians' hands as well, which is interesting. I mean, so in other words, the U.S. gets a little credit here, even though that was not our intent. I'm not going to say our intent was to help free Syria. We also get discredit because of Obama back in 2014 not helping the Syrians. In any case, so you get to this attack. They've gotten a lot of assistance. You said the rebels, intelligence, weapons, and this time because the Iranians and the Russians aren't joining in, everything changes.
Yeah. They don't have enough to prop themselves up. They were held up by Russia, by Iran.
Right.
They are very much what Russia was, which is a paper tiger.
Right.
And without Russia relies on its huge numbers, and that's all it really has going for it. But without those huge numbers, it's nothing. It's not got any sophisticated tech. It's the only thing it really has is nuclear weapons.
Russia, yeah.
Syria was just held together with thumbtacks and glue.
Right.
It was just waiting for a decent push, and once the momentum starts, it's really hard to stop it.
Right.
It's really, really hard to stop the momentum in a fight when it's going, because the rebels are on a high because they're making serious progress and they're winning.
Right.
And they're making ground. And the Assad loyal forces are crapping themselves because the rebels are gaining ground.
Right.
A lot of them aren't particularly supportive of the regime. They are kind of doing it for work, really.
I'm sorry. You're saying the regimes, the soldiers actually working for Assad were not necessarily on his side.
No, but look how easily they switch sides.
Right.
They're there for the paycheck.
They're doing a job.
Yeah.
But not a job that they're very thrilled about.
Yeah. If you look how quickly they dropped their uniforms and stuck on civilian clothing and joined the rebels.
Right.
That is not indicative of a loyal fighting force that will go down for, Queen and country.
Right. Right.
That is, I'm here for the paycheck.
Right.
don't really want to die doing it.
Right. Now, what do we know about I say the rebels, but the insurgents? There are several groups. I don't know, and I don't know how informed you. I don't want to necessarily get you off of topics that you know, but are you very up on the various groups that are involved here in the attack that were involved in this insurgency?
To an extent, I know the main group is designated both by the US and the UK, and I think most of NATO countries, as a terror organization.
Yeah, that's the group. In English, we call them HTS, I believe.
Yeah, HTS is designated as a terror group by the West. However, up until it was designated as a terror group, it was being supported by the UK. Interesting.
But when do you know when the terror designation happened? Like, when did the UK support HTS until?
I think 2014.
Okay.
2015 maybe.
And let me just jump in too. And the concern was these guys basically had ties to Al Qaeda, and I think maybe some ISIS as well.
Yeah, some of them were. I think it was ISIS-K, and some of them were Al Qaeda. But split away because it was too radical for them. It is a challenging rope to walk, because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But as you say, when you're going to topple a dictator, you better know who's coming next.
Right.
There is a couple of other groups, the Kurds, for example, who are kind of supported and protected by the UK and the US, amongst other countries.
Right.
But Turkey doesn't like them, so Turkey was supporting, I think they were supporting HTS and another group.
Right.
No, they were supporting another group.
Turkey. Now the Turks are supporting somebody in the north as well. Yeah.
But they were supporting them purely to get rid of the Kurds.
Right. Correct. Right.
So, as far, in the early 2000s, the UK and the US was trying to do business with Syria. We were trying to do business with Assad.
Right.
Assad's wife is British, Syrian British. He was an eye doctor in London.
Right.
They were invited to meet the Queen, and the hope was that he wasn't going to be the tyrant his father was. Right. And that there could be business done. Right. And that obviously didn't really pan out when he started gassing his own people. Yeah. I was there. I seen it. I seen the gas attacks on schools, on civilian populations. It was horrible. Well, let me ask you a little bit. And keep in mind, TikTok kind of freaks out when we get too graphic on things. But you were British military. You happened to actually be in Syria either during or just after the infamous gas attacks 10 years ago when Assad gassed his own people. Now, were you already in the region? Were you already in Syria? To what degree you can say with the British military at that point? We were near. Okay. And so he attacks his own people. He literally kills thousands in a couple different cities. And you guys come in, the British military, and you actually come into some of the areas that have been gassed? We went to verify reports. To verify reports that there had been gas used? Yeah, and document what had happened. Okay, and what can you tell me? Describe what happened? You're walking into a town. Where are you walking? What do you see? So I've been to two occasions. One was smaller than the other. The larger of the ones, the thing that sticks with me the most was coming across a girls' school that had been hit, and it wasn't very nice. There wasn't any survivors really in there. And how old girls are you talking about in this school? They look like young girls. Meaning 5, 6, 7 years old, or what do you? Meaning probably from the ages of maybe 7 to 12.
Wow. So you were at a school of girls around ages 7 to 12 in Syria right after Assad had gassed them, basically.
Yeah, he'd gassed the town. He'd gassed
Right.
the entire town.
And I mean, you're in this school and these poor girls are there still dead.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Syria was horribly oppressed, and they had no regard for what they were doing to the civilians. They just, anywhere that was sort of rebel held and kind of was seen to be supportive of rebels was fair game for them to hit.
Right.
And it was Russian gas that was used.
Right. It was sarin nerve gas, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So let's fast forward to now. So this insurgency, it doesn't start, but the latest battle of the insurgency starts about 2 weeks ago. This time it's very successful. As we said, the Russians don't get involved because they're bogged down in Ukraine. They can't afford the troops. They can't afford the weapons. The Iranians don't get involved. They're bogged down because they've already used a bunch of their weapons already against the Israelis. They don't have a lot left. B, the Israelis have blown up a lot of the Iranian weapons, so they're not available. C, Iran is worried about a possible war with Israel, so they want to save their weapons. So everyone is kind of turning their back on Assad. Hezbollah, now I think you had told me the other day, Hezbollah, which is the terrorist group in Lebanon that's been terrorizing the Lebanese, you did not have a sense, because I've seen some people say that Hezbollah also was not able to help the Assad regime because the Israelis had so destroyed them. Were you the one who told me that you did not necessarily think that Hezbollah would have come to help anyway?
It's not that they wouldn't have come to help. It's that they wouldn't have been of any help. They're not a fighting force with the resources to launch anything other than a guerrilla warfare campaign.
Even though there were 30 or 40,000 of them or whatever, it's not enough to.
Not really. The rebel. The last time, bear in mind this was a number of years ago. The last time I'd seen a kind of rough count of the total rebel forces was kind of 300,000 or something. So
right.
30,000 is not going to make a squeak of a difference.
Okay.
They're not trained. That's the big game changer this time. Ukrainian special forces have been training these groups in Syria.
Right.
Purely to F with Russia.
Right.
For the last 3 years. So these militias are now professionally trained armies.
Who are you talking about?
The rebel forces in Syria. They're now, effectively professionally trained fighting forces.
So the Ukrainians, so the Ukrainians were in fact helping train some of these Syrian rebels to fight the Russians.
Yeah.
And just to screw with the Russians.
Yeah.
Well, actually, let me put a finer point on it. It's not just to be a dick. There were reports about this, that the Ukrainians may have in fact helped the Syrian rebels. The idea here is that if Ukraine is invaded by the Russians and the Russians want to take over Ukraine, which they do, and the Russians want to destroy Ukraine, Ukraine's entire national identity, they want to make the entire country Russia. Part of what your goal is to keep the Russians as occupied anywhere else so that they've got to move troops away from Ukraine. So if the Russians are in Syria, and Syria is so important to them, which it is, because Syria was Russia's #1 ally in the Middle East. Honestly, they're only, there's Iran, fair enough, but Syria was the ally. It's gone. If you're Ukraine, you say, I want to tie up Russian troops. Let's screw with Syria. Let's do a real threat to Russia itself. Maybe I can help train these opposition guys and have them attack the Russians. B, I can have them attack the Assad regime, which will force the Russians to put more resources into Syria to buttress the Assad regime. Either way, Syria is having to move more forces to Syria. Russia is having to move more forces to Syria rather than keeping those forces in Ukraine. That helps Ukraine. At least my analysis would be, so in other words, it wasn't just Ukraine dicking around saying, yeah, let's screw with the Russians. It was Ukraine strategically saying, what can we do around the world to make life hard for the Russians so that they don't have as many men to screw with us?
Yeah, that's precisely it. It's very...
Because they're doing it in Africa too.
Yeah, well, like, the further the Russians are spread, the better it is for Ukraine. The other advantage is that it's another embarrassment on the world stage. Like, either way is a win for Ukraine. If Russia pulls out, it's very expensive to pull out of a country. It's not cheap. They've wasted a lot of money, a lot of resources, flight time, it's a ton of work to effectively evacuate a standing ground force from a country.
Right.
That's time, it's money, it's resources that the Russians just don't have. All those planes that are, going back and forth carrying things out of Syria are all logging flight hours that they're going to need maintenance and replacement parts for. It slows down everything Russia can do in Ukraine.
Right.
Now, the alternative is Russia bolsters the forces in Syria, which has a equally good benefit of meaning there's less forces in Ukraine.
Right.
So either way for Ukraine, it was win-win.
It was win-win for the Ukrainians to basically help the Syrian opposition because it helped weaken my enemy's enemy is my friend, but also quite literally by the Ukrainians helping the Syrian rebels, they were helping attack Russia and weaken Russia, which made Russia even weaker for fighting in Ukraine as well. So Ukraine was really playing some chess here.
Yeah. Ukraine was playing chess and Russia's been playing checkers.
Really interesting. So what else here? I'm trying to think of sort of, and you guys can ask questions too, which I'm happy to sort of jump into. I want to make sure we're sort of hitting the main points. Oh, actually, one main point we should talk about. So Callum had mentioned earlier that there was, the Brits, the Americans, maybe even the UN, I'm sure the EU probably has declared the lead Syrian opposition group to be a terrorist group. The leader, is it Jabani? I think is his name. Had ties to Al Qaeda, ties to ISIS, or Jolani. Thank you, that's the name. Ties to ISIS. He now is claiming to be less ISIS-y. He's claiming to be more moderate now, more welcoming. They are certainly, I think, at this point so far, they've done a good job of presenting a more moderate face in terms of just the last couple days of towns they're occupying. But there's still real concern about who these guys are.
Yeah, well, I know this is going to annoy Dan, and Dan, I love you dearly, but
who's Dan?
We talked about times on TikTok, but I refer back to the IRA.
Oh, right.
The IRA were a terrorist organization, and now they are the government.
Right.
It can happen. It's happened before. It can happen again.
Okay.
It's people with a cause. The IRA done some really horrible, nasty stuff. And now they are the government. It is
in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Right.
Sinn Féin is effectively the IRA. It's the political wing of the IRA.
Right.
And people will argue about that. It just depends what side of the sectarian fence you're on.
Right.
But there's filing cabinets on all the stuff that they done, and when we had the agreement that no one goes to prison for anything that either side done in that conflict, and we all just become friends again.
I think he's talking Northern Ireland, Daniel, not Ireland.
Yeah.
Daniel's getting upset. Northern Ireland,
yeah,
I think
sorry, man. I knew you would.
I think he meant Northern Ireland, not Ireland.
We've had this argument a couple of times.
Well, actually, you know what? Let me jump in though and make this a more general point. And I'm not an expert on Northern Ireland, but I certainly grew up hearing about this stuff. There were a lot of people blowing things up on the Irish side, and a lot of bad things happening on the English side for decades. Well, longer probably.
Yeah,
and
no one's hands were clean in this.
No. But that's not. But that's also even better. No one's hands were clean. Lots of death and murder going around, and both sides were able to reach a deal where they put the death and killing behind them. That's the point. That's the point that we're making. And that's the point Callum's making, which I think is interesting. Now, you could also say, maybe the Irish are different than the Syrians or the Iraqis. I don't know. Whether national temperament matters, certainly national history matters, right? I mean, who knows? I mean, the personal history of the Irish versus the personal history of the Syrians or the Iraqis, but nonetheless, it is not. It is certainly possible that the leopard spots can change, and that this former ISIS-friendly terrorist could be more moderate now. But it's also a real concern. Having said that, what do you do? I've seen there's a lot of trolls out there who are trying to knock the Syrians. A lot of these are we call them the tankies, basically Americans and Brits, most of them, who side with our enemies, basically. They're people who, they hate America, they hate Britain. Honestly, they hate freedom. They really like our enemies. These people are very pro-Assad, for example. The ones I'm not going to name names, but they're very pro-Assad. They were defending the dictator. Well, Tulsi Gabbard's one of them, who is Trump's new intelligence head. He wants very pro-Assad. And I'm trying to think why I was bringing this up with these guys being so pro-Assad. And they've been really almost enjoying the fact. How do I put this? Not enjoying, knocking the Syrians, basically, almost trying to say the Syrians are wrong to be free. And it's wrong to get rid of Assad as the dictator because, these next guys are going to be just as bad, blah, blah, blah. And I understand a part of the argument, which I've told you guys before, which is if you're going to take out a dictator, you better be sure who's coming next because you don't want to replace him with somebody worse. Having said that, if you are an oppressed people, that isn't really an argument. If you're a third party, if you're the United States, if you're an imperialistic party, then it is a good argument to say, if you're going to go in and try to overthrow a government, you better know what's coming next. Yes. If you are an oppressed people, I don't think the argument stands. I don't think you tell people, yes, you've been living under a brutal dictatorship for 50 years, but you shouldn't try to overthrow them because you don't know who's coming next. Wrong, right? Vladimir Putin and Russia, the Russian people shouldn't rise up against Putin because they're not sure who's coming next. Bullshit, right? Eastern Europe, same thing. They weren't sure what was coming next. They shouldn't have risen up. And I feel the same way with Syria. I think it's almost condescending and evil to tell the Syrian people, well, these guys could be evil too. Ha ha. What you're doing is wrong. And it's a very I don't know if it's Western or what it is, but it's a very obnoxious attitude, I think.
It's a lack of concern for others than yourself. And it's, the Syrian regime's fallen. I believe Georgia will be next. Fingers crossed. There's a lot of change coming. Some people are saying, potentially another Arab Spring. There is changes coming. Once the dominoes start, it's hard to get them to stop. Right. And the Syrian people have been horribly oppressed for such a long time. Truly, I think Iran will fall. I do. I think Georgia will fall, or the Georgian government will fall. I think by summer of next year, I think Iran will fall too.
Huh. Oh, wow.
Iran was very similar to Syria before the Islamic Revolution and the horrible evil buggers that are in now. Right. It was similar. It was kind of westernized, very modern, that kind of Persian type vibe going on.
But an autocrat running the country.
Yeah.
The Shah.
The thing is, people are the people have been oppressed for so long, and you can only keep oppression going for a certain amount of time before people start to get a glimpse, especially in the modern world we're in now, of what it's like for everyone else. Right.
Well, and okay, two different things. One, as you said, people start to see other countries and what's happening. People see in Syria that the biggest, baddest dictator in the region got overthrown. It starts to open your minds to what's possible. It starts to tell you if it could happen there, maybe it could happen here. It's the kind of thing dictators don't want. This is the Putin thing. I mean, Putin really doesn't like it's real quick, Callum, but Putin does not like to see freedom in Ukraine. He doesn't like to see freedom in Georgia, the former Soviet state on his border, because these are people like the Russians in some ways, and they certainly, well, they were part of the Soviet Union with Russia, so they were certainly very close in some ways. And seeing them overthrow their own dictators, so to speak, suggests to the Russian people, maybe the Russian people can overthrow their dictator as well. It's a very dangerous lesson, a good lesson, but a very dangerous lesson.
Yeah, you're right. It's dangerous for Putin, and it's the fact that Putin cannot support arguably his biggest ally in the region.
Who is Syria? Yeah.
It's quite embarrassing, I have to say. Not only embarrassing, it shows that this war of attrition that they've got going on with Ukraine is wearing them down.
Right. Actually, if I can say real quick, folks, sorry, but real quick, people on TikTok, follow Callum, because in principle, if he gets 17 more followers, he might be able to turn on his video. We're trying to get enough people to follow him that he can do video. Somebody said he only needs, Empathy says he needs 17 more. Poppy says the same. That's pretty wild. Follow Callum, and maybe we can actually get to see him, which would be nice just to get a little more of a personal, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Callum, but I just saw them commenting, and it'd be nice. So follow Callum, folks, and then we're going to continue here. I know there's got to be 16 of you who haven't followed him yet. Come on.
There's a lot of there's a bigger argument around it, and that previous to this war with conflict with Ukraine,
right?
Russia would have been in a position to very easily quell the rebellion,
right?
Effectively, and my account is no longer private, but some of you is asking me to approve your follows, but the vast majority of you is not.
Oh, weird.
It's strange.
All right.
But the fact that Russia can't support its biggest ally in the West, in the Middle East.
Oh, that's a good point.
Is quite embarrassing. It would be akin to America not being able to support Israel.
Right.
You can imagine the embarrassment that would cause.
Right.
And it's just not a good look for Putin.
Right.
It's not a good look for Russia on the world stage.
Try to do your video. We've got a question. Still not letting you?
Nah, it still says live access needed to go live on video as guest. You can go live on audio.
Oh, he needs more, guys. We'll keep working on it. Real quick. Nordic Warrior is saying, do you think Syria will have a democracy, or do you think it will just be more free than it is now?
I think the people want a democracy, and I think ultimately it's actually going to come down to how much the West is willing to get involved. And if we are to get involved, at least to a degree, aid, support, we'll rebuild some of your infrastructure. However, you need to do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
That can make a big difference in the conflict in the rebuilding of Syria. Is that these people, they have their freedom. The people now want their freedom. They want democratically elected votes. I know the Prime Minister has said he will support a transition to a government chosen by the Syrian people.
Right.
So the smart thing for them to do would be to actually ask someone like the UN to come in and say, can the UN please support us have a fair and true election?
Right.
That's not going to be able to happen for about 6 months.
Right.
Easily. That wouldn't be able to happen anytime soon.
Right.
The Prime Minister could stay in for now, and they could do a kind of power sharing type thing like they do in Northern Ireland, for example.
Right.
and that could be where it goes for now until they have an election. The thing is, the Syrian people don't want another extremist running their country.
Right.
They want to be foot free. The people want to be free.
Well, let me finish. Let me throw in something. Go on. Yeah.
If they can have a fair and free election, they can be a pretty key player in the region.
Well, I guess
it's in everyone's benefit.
Right.
They have a democratically elected government.
Right.
They'll probably get huge loans from the West.
Right.
Maybe not the US under Trump, but they could get some pretty substantial loans for infrastructure from the West. And Syria could become a functioning democracy akin to, some of akin to Israel.
I was going to say akin to Israel. And by the way, folks, I was going to bring this point up, and it's one of the things where you really have to get somebody who knows Syria, but I mean, knows Syria inside out, because there are not any really good, the only good functioning democracy in the Middle East is Israel. And we're not even talking about Gaza. We're not talking about any of that shit. This isn't positive or negative Israel stuff. This is as far as democracy. Israel has a very good functioning democracy. Nobody else does. And it worries me because I'm not sure how you do this. I mean, for example, Syria's neighbors, they're not really, Lebanon kinda, I guess, right? But Jordan, one of our best allies, it's a kingdom. It's not a freaking democracy. They don't, the king of Jordan doesn't want people electing, you know what I mean? Like, he wants to be in charge. I worry to what, and then, forget the Gulf states. They're all kingdoms, and rather a little bit authoritarian kingdoms at that, right? The Saudis are horrible, but some of the other guys aren't much better. I worry to what degree, I worry when and if the Middle East will actually be ready, whether the Arab states will ever be ready for a democracy. I hope to God, I don't know if they're there.
It's an interesting argument. I believe Syria was a democracy, was a founding member of the UN, I believe. But I believe they were a democracy up until the Assad regime was kind of voted in and then just took over.
Right.
A bit like Putin. Kind of became a democracy, but didn't stay one for very long.
Right.
Don't quote me on it exactly, but my understanding was that Syria was a democracy for some time.
Okay.
And it can go back. The people of Syria are they are quite West. They are, I would say that they're akin to kind of Turkish people in some of their viewpoints.
Right.
The vast majority of them, they do want to be with the West. Obviously, they have their Persian Arab heritage and the kind of beliefs and things that come with that. But the kingdoms of the Middle East are, long-standing kingdoms. There isn't a king of Syria for there to be.
Right, but there are a lot of factions, which Misha was just raising on YouTube.
Yeah, well, there is.
And excuse me. Let me step back. I didn't just mean factions. There are a lot of ethnic groups that are factions, and you get into this whole. I saw somebody the other day talking about whether Syria and Iraq should even exist as countries, really, whether they should have been 5 countries or 6 countries. The
argument is that there is a possibility that the Kurds might break off into, some kind of Kurdistan type situation.
Right, which Turkey doesn't want.
Turkey doesn't want, but what's Turkey going to do about it? It's the Kurds are under US protection, so. Right. If Turkey wants their F-16s, they're going to have to play ball.
Right.
So there's a lot of warring factions that have been fighting over stuff from hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, actually, but you know what? Iraq's a good example. It's not like we got rid of Saddam Hussein and everybody said, "Woo, we're free. Let's have a democracy and all get along." Huh. You know, I mean, that's the you can't. Not only can you not impose on people a democratic system because they have to want it, but and again, this is where you get into each country. You've really got to be an expert on the country. These countries may not even be one country. They may be three countries in one.
Yeah.
So that they don't want to come together. Or honestly, look at the Palestinians in Gaza. They had free elections 17 years ago, and they voted for Hamas terrorists to run them, and the rest is history. I mean, it's you can even have an election and pick the wrong people who then.
Well, Trump's a prime example of that.
Well, I mean, actually, I was. It's funny as I was saying it, I was thinking Trump, but you know, it's yeah. In any case. So I mean, I don't even know whether democracy is a possibility. At the very least, I would like there to not be dictatorship, to not be. I'd like elections to be fair. It'd be nice not to have Islamic State oppressing people. You know.
I think the thing is, the people have now got a taste of freedom. I don't think they're going to willingly go back to being oppressed. Is the trouble.
Well, hopefully. Well, here's okay. Let me devil's advocate you. Maybe, but who overthrew Assad? Was it the Syrian people or was it this rebel alliance? And are they the same thing? Did the Syrian people really rise up? I don't know if they did. Thank you, Annie.
I would argue that the Syrian people rose up in support of the rebels.
Okay.
They laid down. The Syrian soldiers laid down their arms and joined the rebels on the road in.
Okay.
In the road to Damascus, they joined the rebels. Once Aleppo fell, it was over.
Okay. And by the way, I raised this because I've always had sort of my own personal theory on these things where I feel that countries, revolutions don't necessarily work unless the people buy into the revolution. You can't really impose a revolution, I feel. So in other words, you can overthrow a government, but Eastern Europe, the people rose up and overthrew their governments. That made it much more likely that the ensuing democracy could survive. Now in Hungary and other places, you're seeing it backstep. Hell, you're seeing it backstep in America. What I worry about is countries where we just overthrow the ruler and then we say, now they're free. And the people themselves don't really own that revolution because they didn't necessarily ask for it. That's sort of what I'm asking about Syria was, did these rebels, this small group of rebels overthrow the government, or did the people actually have, agency, as the kids like to use the phrase today?
I think
ownership of it.
I think the people supported the rebels. I think once people, what would happen is the rebels would hold an area, and then he would drop gas on the civilian population.
Assad would, right?
Yeah, and the surviving civilian population would be like, WTF? Like, that's not what's supposed to happen.
Right.
And then the support starts to change.
Right.
It's like when the Romanians, for example, rose up, they were being effectively oppressed by Russia.
Right.
And when they started realizing that the Russians were treated like royalty, then that's when the problems rose up, when these people are being treated better than us and we're all supposed to be one.
Right. Right.
And that's where it really comes in. And things like the videos being leaked of Assad's luxury car collection and all these ridiculous things. People don't want to see that.
Right.
People don't want to see their government spending their money on these kinds of things.
Right.
Everyone loved Gaddafi for the longest time. He'd done a lot of good things for Libya. Gas was super cheap. University was free for everyone. You got married, they would give you money to buy a home, like all sorts of things. But then he just went a little bit nuts. and then started killing his own people, and that's when the problem started.
Now, sorry, real quick. He's talking about the Libyan people's impression of Gaddafi. We hated him. He was a big supporter of international terror. He's intentionally not talking about that because he's talking about what the impression was among the populace of this leader. I'm giving my dog some water, by the way. Keep talking.
So the Syrian people were, relatively comfortable for a while. I believe in the kind of late part of the noughties, early part of the 2010s, Assad went a little bit nuts and just started imprisoning people. Things like children being born in prison and never seen the light of day. These things start to leak out into the populace, which will make you incredibly unpopular.
Right.
With the civilian population.
Right.
You can imagine. Well, we all see what happened with Trump at the border. The kids in cages.
Right.
It's horrible images. It's like that. Only those kids were getting out. These kids never did.
Right. Right. Questions, folks, for Callum or me or whatever, just about what's going on with Syria. I'm trying to think like what else as far as kind of where things stand now. What's Iran's play in Syria? I mean, nothing right now. Well, actually, here's a question. I mean, I was hearing that with these new guys now taking over Syria, Iran will lose its ability to funnel weapons to the Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon. And the Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon are the ones that the Israelis have been really destroying, where they blew up the 5,000 pagers on these guys. That's Hezbollah, terrorist group that has been really terrorizing Lebanon for a very long time. Kind of an informal government that just took over part of Lebanon, really. It's just horrific what they've done to the poor Lebanese people and to that country. With Hezbollah. What was I going to say with Hezbollah here? I don't know what I was going to say about Hezbollah. I was thinking of them with this. We were saying that they're not going to come to their aid. Oh, with Iran, yeah. So the talk was that Iran will no longer be able to supply weapons to Hezbollah. They were Hezbollah's main weapon supplier. They were supplying it by land via Syria. Assad let them. These guys won't. Are you up on why these guys are not necessarily friendly with Iran? Now, clearly, Iran supported Assad against them. Fair enough. But
yeah, well, that pretty much sums it up.
Okay.
I believe. I think they might be. I think one of them might be Sunni, and the other one might be the other kind of Muslim. I think
the Sunni and Shias.
Shia, I think.
Right.
I believe that's right. I believe Iran is Shia, and I think most of them are Sunni. But don't quote me on that entirely. I also think that it's very hard to then kind of become friends with someone that's been screwing you for 10 years.
Fair enough. And helping the other guy kill you. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like,
right.
It would be akin to Ukraine suddenly becoming best buds with Belarus after Belarus let Russia launch missiles and planes and shit into Russia, into Ukraine.
Well, let me ask you, here's what because Mona just said, I'm Iranian. Iranian people don't support Muslims. That may be true, but the Iranian government did support a Muslim government, so to speak. I say Muslim, whatever you want to call it, right? They supported Assad, a dictator running an Arab country, a Muslim country, even if he was somewhat secular. So that's why I'm saying, like, it's interesting. Why wouldn't they both say, well, okay, yeah, new guy took over in Syria. They're different. They're Al-Qaeda-ish, whatever.
I'm just going to butt in. Mona, you're Iranian. Iranian people don't support Muslim people. Iranian people are predominantly Muslim.
Well, that's true too. Actually, fair enough. Fair enough. I was thinking Arabs, but you're right. In terms of Muslims, they are Muslims. Yeah.
Assad was Alawite, which is closer to Christian. just government, we're not happy, and we're fighting with Iranian government.
You know.
Okay, interesting point of view.
But anyway, it's
the Iranian government is obviously a strict.
actually, wait a minute. Am I wrong here? Hasn't it been ISIS? Wasn't it ISIS that recently did the terrorist attacks in Iran? Remember? At that funeral for the general that Trump killed?
Oh, it was ISIS.
It was ISIS. Yeah.
It was ISIS-K, wasn't it?
Yeah. So you've got weird antagonism amongst various Islamic groups, even though from the West we might look at it. No. Israel didn't blow up I don't think Israel blew up the funeral. Israel blew up the guy in the residence. This was an actual funeral they had for Soleimani, and I believe it was ISIS that blew up the funeral, or ISIL that blew up the funeral.
Israel blew up something else.
Israel went after the guy that was the Hezbollah leader or whatever, who was in the hotel or wherever it was. Yeah.
There is kind of these warring factions, and some of them are due to the fact that ISIS is obviously a very extreme interpretation of the Quran, and kind of want strict Sharia law enforced, and some of these places are less so. I have also heard that young Iranians are very much like young British people in the way that we're not religious.
Interesting, more secular. Okay, right, that's interesting.
I believe in the UK, I don't know any young people in the UK that go to church. Not one.
Interesting. Right.
Not one. And it's becoming a theme in more of the world. America's probably a bit more exempt to it than the rest. But
let me ask you. So there were a lot of reports today of the Israelis going in and blowing up possibly chemical weapon supplies, but also military equipment in Syria. Are they basically going after anything they can to make sure that the new guy who takes over, who we know is not friendly to Israel, has as few weapons as possible to eventually attack Israel, I'm assuming?
There is that. There is also the fact that you don't want, there's a bunch of chemical weapons, biological weapons, and even some nuclear weapons that are missing currently. And we're not entirely sure who has them. They're kind of likely being sold back and forth in the black market. What you don't want is another 1,000 tons of sarin gas out there in the world. Right. Because it's some really, really nasty stuff.
Right.
So the logical thing would be just to destroy. I know the US has been carrying out airstrikes today.
Yes.
I believe the UK as well as Israel have been carrying out airstrikes. We're just trying to make sure this stuff doesn't go anywhere.
Okay, so it's not simply a matter of concern that Jolani, the Syrian rebels will get it. It's also a concern of we don't know who the hell's going to get it, and that's the point. You don't want these high class weapons just going to terrorist groups or God knows who.
The thing is, you don't really want them existing at all. We have some because Russia has some, and that's basically the only reason we have them. We don't really want anyone else having them.
Right. Okay.
That's the thing.
Okay.
We don't want India and Pakistan having nuclear weapons, but we're a bit late for that.
Right. Right.
It's more just a case of you just don't want them being in existence, especially when who might be in possession of them is up for grabs.
Right. Okay.
So, and the military equipment, Israel is going to do what Israel is going to do. They are just going to destroy anything that might, because, let's say Iran comes out and takes all the stuff. They don't want Iran having any more equipment.
Right. Well, and again, they don't know this guy is no friend of Israel. He is former ISIS and Al-Qaeda. If you're Israel, you say, I'm not going to take any chances that this ass gets a lot of really good weapons. This is our chance to degrade the weapons and you're blowing up weapons he doesn't have yet. You're blowing up weapons that the Syrian army abandoned. So you're not even blowing him up potentially, which is good, frankly, because it makes it a little easier. It's not like you're blowing up him and then he's going to attack you back. You're going after the weapons the Russians abandoned before anybody gets them. So there's a little bit of plausible deniability of, I'm not really attacking you, Jelani, right? I'm attacking the Russians in a way, or the Russian weapons. Yeah. So it's honestly, it's not stupid what Israel is doing. I was seeing people today try to spin it as, oh, Israel being imperialist or whatever. No, Israel's being actually very smart. It's something we would do if we were next door as well.
I think there's an argument against increasing their buffer zone. That's just, to me, that's just another land grab by Israel. But Israel will do as Israel does.
Well, and let me actually, one second. What Callum is saying is there is something else going on. In addition to Israel blowing up weapons that the Russians left to make sure they don't get into the hands of anybody bad, there also has been Israelis' incursions along the border with Syria, Golan Heights, where, you know, the Israelis claim they're trying to create a safer buffer now between Syria and them. It could also be Netanyahu and Israel grabbing more land to just steal more land from Syria and make it part of Israel. So that there may be legitimate criticism of that. Yeah.
Yeah. But Israel does as Israel does. So,
you know,
that is what it is. I think they're kind of just going to use that as an excuse and hold on to it. Like when there's a new regime, if we'll see if a democratically elected calm regime comes in and Israel don't want to hand it back, then they're going to have to own their their cards and say we just done a land grab. But, you know, we'll see. I wouldn't trust Netanyahu as far as I could throw him uphill.
Right.
But, you know, Israel wasn't wasting any time with that. They just straight up went and did it.
Right.
You know, there is an argument going, you don't want unsettled force, like rivaling forces right on your border. But I mean, the buffer zone was a pretty big buffer zone as it was. So,
right.
I mean,
and again, and unclear who these guys are going to be. Are you having an Al Qaeda-ish terrorist group take over next to you? I mean, and potentially get their hands on a rather large military force. You know, there are legitimate concerns. Well, actually, the same concerns all of us have about who these Syrian rebels really are the same concerns Israel has, because they're literally next door. And frankly, it's the same concerns Jordan probably has too, I would guess.
Yeah.
You know, Lebanon as well, maybe Iraq. Yeah. What else, guys? Any more questions? I mean, we've been going for an hour and 10 minutes. We can go a little bit longer. Other questions for Callum or me, or comments? Your take on all of this on TikTok or YouTube? That's a good question. Do we know anything about what's up with the naval base? So, Callum, Russia controlled a naval base in Syria on the Mediterranean. They've controlled it since around 1971. It is their only Mediterranean naval base, apparently. And we don't know now kind of what the status of that is. I think the Russians moved their ships away to be safe, but they are certainly going to try to negotiate a continued. They're even insinuating it. The Russians are now saying, "Oh, we sort of asked Assad to step down," and basically the Russians are trying to say, "Look, we didn't come and help him. We want to renegotiate this naval base thing to let us keep it, and we'll give you some money." Are they going to get away with that?
It depends if the West wants to give them more money. To not give them it.
Right.
And I mean, the Russians have been supporting Assad's forces for a long time.
Right.
There is only so many bridges money can mend. You know, you can't destroy 10, 15 years of hatred with money. It just doesn't. And Russia's not got the money.
Right.
To keep doing it.
Well, also Russia, I mean, if I were Syria, if I were the Syrian rebels, I'd be a little worried about keeping the Russians there at all, because the Russians are a nice little spearhead to bring Assad back at some point.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I don't know whether they would do it. I don't know whether it could be done. But if he wants to come back, a Russian military base is a damn good place to start, or a Russian naval base.
I don't think there's any chance of Assad coming back. The way his forces just drop their weapons is, there's no coming back.
So he doesn't have a base to come back to, hopefully.
Yeah, there's no base of support to come back to.
Right.
It's done. It's over. The people are finished with them.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Whoever project could potentially right, Russia will try and negotiate with the rebels to stay. The rebels will get something out of it, but it's whether the rebels care. Whether depends what the rebels want. Do they want to have their long-standing enemy,
right,
come back? Do they want their long-standing enemy to come back for the sake of some dollars, or that base is now up for grabs, effectively?
Right.
Could they get the Americans there? Could
Right.
they get the Brits, the French, whoever it may be there?
Right.
It's going to pay them anyway, but there's probably a larger benefit to having a Western country there rather than Russia.
Right. 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 God, it would be great. I mean, well, okay. Can you tell me? I mean, as a military, so somebody was asking again who Callum is. Callum is a old friend, but also a longtime British military guy. Left rather recently. Was stationed in the Middle East. Was stationed in Syria, among other places. What is the advantage of Russia? Okay, Syria was Russia's big ally in the Middle East. Russia had an air base and a naval base there on the Mediterranean. So what? I mean, so what if Syria is your big ally? People keep talking about how it lets Russia project force in the region and force in the Mediterranean and force in Africa. What does that actually mean? Like, so what? He's their ally. That's nice. But what does Russia gain by having Syria? What does Russia gain by keeping these military bases?
I mean, it's influence, it's power, it's money. You can bring your big ships there. You can, have a large air force presence in the area. You can, for example, an American carrier strike group,
right,
can single-handedly topple, 50-60% of the countries in the world.
Okay.
That is a projection of power.
Okay.
So it's, for example, I'll use America as an example. If a country's acting up and then they stroll along and park a carrier strike group off the coast of your country,
right,
you're going to think again. And that's what it allows Russia to do across Africa.
But doesn't Russia, does Russia not have the aircraft carriers and everything we've got? Why do they need Syria as a base? Why? I mean, we also just...
Russia's aircraft carrier is currently in pieces, I believe. But
okay.
Was it the Gorbachev or something?
Huh.
Or something? I believe it is basically knackered.
Huh.
But they do have other destroyers and things. You go park a missile destroyer, a ballistic missile destroyer off the coast of a small African country. They don't have anything to fight against that.
Right.
They just don't. And it being in Syria, it can move around to where you want it to be
much more quickly. Okay.
Much more quickly than sending it from Russia.
Okay. Okay. Right. So basically it makes Russia a bigger threat in the region. It makes Russia's voice more important in the region because they've got a lot of weapons right nearby. Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the gifts there, guys, on TikTok. Okay. Right. I mean, I know also interestingly, because they were talking about this naval base, and again, we hope to God they lose the naval base. That would be huge. But that they were using it to really kind of harass us in the Mediterranean, to also help project their power into Africa. A lot of their, they're working with a lot of the dictatorships in Africa, including the new military dictatorships. And a lot of the work they do with them flies via Syria, via the bases in Syria. So interesting, it's sort of curtailing. This is really important bases in Syria for Russia's power in the region. Again, Africa, Mediterranean, and Middle East. It's a huge hit to them if they lose that, which let's hope to God they do.
Yeah. Russia losing that will damage their ability to project power in Africa.
Right.
There is also the fear that it's very possible China might want that base.
Oh, wow.
So
wow.
China to have it.
That's scary. Yeah, Jeffrey just asked the same question. That's very scary.
Yeah. So if China most definitely does want it. If China gets it, and again, it's a reason for the West to want it, because if they don't want it and get it,
right,
odds are China will.
Right. Problem is Trump. Trump doesn't understand any of these arguments, so who the hell knows?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, equally, could Biden have enough time to do it before January 20th? Possibly.
Right.
And I mean, if it's going to, it would cost more to leave it than it would just to keep it for Trump's term. So there's an argument that he might just leave it alone, or tell me he can put a hotel in Aleppo or something. It'll be fine.
Yeah. No, that would be bad. What else, guys? Any more questions? We've been going for an hour and 20 minutes. I don't want to go on too long. Maybe last question or two for Callum on all of this. We're talking about Syria. And it always takes a couple of seconds for people to pop in. Do I think they have the shooter? We can maybe talk about that briefly in a second. Yep. All right. Let me. Why are they bombing the military base? I don't know if anybody is bombing the Russian military base. I don't know if they are.
They were. It's just to destroy the equipment.
Oh, okay. Oh, so the Syrian army wouldn't get to it. You mean, or you mean the Israelis bombing it so that the terrorists or somebody wouldn't get it?
Yeah, they were bombing the airport, the military airport.
Oh, okay. That I knew today. Yes.
So
yeah.
I'm assuming that's what he means.
Okay. Oh, okay. So last little thing I'll mention briefly, although we could do our own show about this one. Actually, this one's almost worth doing a show about at some point. It looks very much like the FBI caught today the guy who killed the American insurance executive. Really crazy story. He's some kid who's like 26 years old, looks like he's a genius, was top of his class in a very expensive, a $40,000 a year high school, studied AI at the Ivy League schools, cute young Italian American kid. And at least, again, if you believe the police, he's alleged to have plotted this whole murder of this insurance executive. Really weird story. What has been interesting to me has been seeing the support for this kid. I decided to do a TikTok video asking people, and I mean, it's almost overwhelming, the support for this kid. I'm very surprised, only because I guess I would have thought people, of course, hate insurance companies. In America, anybody who's not from America doesn't appreciate how bad it really is here with our healthcare system. But nonetheless, I didn't really expect people to be just supporting murder of corporate CEOs. That still shocked me, but I am blown away as to how overwhelming the support is. Just very interesting.
I actually had a thought on that. Being that every generation has a Robin Hood type figure, and that's all this kid is. It's unusual that he's a trust fund type rich genius kid.
Right.
But if it wasn't him, it would be someone else. It probably doesn't hurt that he's a handsome kid. I know I've seen 100 TikToks of that. I'm in love with a criminal type thing. He's very Jake Gyllenhaal type of vibe. But you could argue that it's going to make a bit of a point. I've seen hundreds of TikToks saying the only CEOs that are safe are the Arizona Iced Tea and Costco and Aldi and things. But I just feel that the American healthcare system is so unpopular, even with Americans, that, and what he wrote on the bullets was just iconic. The monopoly money, all these things, it's been a big psychological game to this kid.
Right.
it's just been a big game. This kid's just wanting to make his point.
I think he's a little crazy, to be honest.
He's like crazy genius crazy.
Maybe, yeah.
To me, he's
No. What I mean is, so far we haven't found anything to suggest that he actually has a personal experience here, like his father was turned down and died. That I would get more. What I don't get is some random kid who's a genius who says, yes, insurance is unfair in America, let's go kill someone. That just seems very borderline crazy to me. Even if you sympathize with him.
I would argue on that, saying that some of the,
I
think it was one of the leading suffragettes was a well-off woman, and she fought to get the vote for women.
Yeah, but I've been a civil rights activist too. You can do that, but when you go and you decide to commit murder, that takes usually some kind of extra oomph that goes beyond just, I'm very committed to my cause. Usually that's a personal reason that is different than I fight for climate change because I care about the climate. That's a little different than I'm going to go and kill people. You know what I mean? To me, usually, I still think the kid's got something a little off in his head, but I am fascinated by the overwhelming support for him. It fascinates me.
Yeah. It's been interesting to see. I did also see something that like a massive percentage of murders in New York go unsolved, and because it's a billionaire healthcare CEO, all resources have been have been used on it. Whereas had it been some random homeless man of color, it may not have been. They probably would have just wrote it off.
Yeah, I mean, though, right? You just decide to assassinate the CEO of a major American company on a sidewalk in Midtown Manhattan. I am not surprised it became a huge story.
Yeah, but what was interesting was that no one cared. Like, I didn't see anyone go, his poor wife and kids or anything like that.
True.
It was just a case of,
oh no, most people seem to be very glad the guy got it, which fascinates me.
Yeah,
It really does. I'm kind of blown away by the reaction. Yeah.
I did see one that the hospital that he was taken to after he was shot was out of
network. Right. His surprise. What do they call those surprise bills? I don't know if you know this, Callum. So, like in America, it may not be legal anymore. I'm not sure, but up until very recently, you'd go to the emergency room, and quite literally, this happened to me. You got a bill from the ambulance. You got a bill from the doctor who saw you. You got a bill from the second doctor who popped their greedy head into the room. You got a bill from the nurse who helped out. I mean, quite literally, every freaking human being was like their own corporate entity, and they would all bill you separately. It was the most offensive experience of your life, of people shaking you down, going to an emergency room in America.
Well, funnily enough, I can't wait to see the bill for the birth of the baby, because this will be hilarious, I think.
Well, and make sure you've got the right insurance. I mean, Angelica knows these things, which is good because she's American. It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, it's anyway, our system is so screwed up on that account. $60 for an aspirin. That happened to me too. I was there once and they were going to give me a painkiller, like an aspirin or something. And I literally asked and said, how much is it? And they said, we don't know. Because quite literally, that aspirin is probably $60.
Well, it's funny because in the UK, you can buy, you can only buy paracetamol, which is
acetaminophen, maybe? Tylenol, yeah.
Yeah. And ibuprofen, you can only buy them in packs of 16, no more.
16?
And you're only allowed to buy 2 packets at a time.
Oh, funny.
To stop people from overdosing. Like, that's
right.
Crazy here. I was in CVS and picked up like a 500.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is odd.
Yeah. Well, but it's nice because it's cheap. I mean, in France, it used to drive me crazy. You buy the damn medicine and you literally have like you said, 16, maybe 30, and you pay $8 for it. And you're like, are you kidding me? It's, from an American perspective, we do kind of like that, being able to get our,
Okay, you say that, but the store own brand paracetamol famously cost 16 pence, so 20 cents for 16.
Oh, okay. Okay. That is pretty cheap though. Fair enough. Fair enough.
So, but
Fair enough.
The National Health Service was on average paying £55 for it.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
So there was a big kind of scandal about that, about hospitals being charged more for drugs ridiculously and things like that.
Right.
So, it's obviously not too dissimilar in the way that these things happen. Oh, hi, Sasha.
I'm just not sure what she's up to. She's like sitting there peering the other way, and it's like, now she heard. I think she heard you. That was actually very funny. She turned and looked around when Callum said her name. That was cute.
Don't worry, Pappy. I'll leave room on the couch for you this time. But yeah, I think obviously in the UK you can just walk into any hospital that you need to, and it's not going to cost you a dime. We don't even have the facilities to take payment.
Right.
We have a cashier in the hospital, but the cashier will give you money for a bus home if you need money.
Oh, funny. That is funny. That's funny. Right. Right.
That's what their job in there is.
Right.
But we, equally, drug companies charge the hospitals more than what they should here. But
right.
I do know that here, every doctor that pokes their head in will send you a couple $100 bill.
Correct. It's terrible. Yeah. Any case. All right, guys, let's call it quits. We've been doing an hour and a half. Callum, thank you for joining us. We've been talking about Syria, the really amazing developments, and good luck to the Syrian people. I still think this is pretty cool what happened. Obviously, worried about what comes next, worried about who these leaders really are. But when it comes down to it, it's still better to try to overthrow dictatorships than to say, well, the next guy might be worse. I'm saying as a people, I think it's good to overthrow the bad guys. And you just fight like hell to make sure that the next guys are better, So, all right. Well, thank you, Callum. Any last words from you, or should we sign off?
No, that's me. I'm good. Happy to jump on as things develop as you need.
Yep. All right. Thanks, man. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll come back tomorrow night, 6:00 Eastern time, US. We'll do our usual Ukraine update, international politics update, since there's so much going on lately. So we'll be doing that too. I'm sure we'll have talk about Syria as well. But for now, like I said, this was so important of news. I thought it would be nice to have a show about Syria today. So I'm glad we did. All right, guys, have a good night, and I will see you all tomorrow. All right. Thank you, mods, for helping out. Everybody for joining. And I will see you all mañana. All right. Bye, guys. All right. You all.